You're listening to the Fun Never Ends podcast with Metalhead Nelson.
Hey, welcome to the Fun Never Ends podcast. I am your metalhead Nelson, and with me is Brutal Brett. Brutal Brett, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well, but I would like to introduce our guest today, actually.
Yes, so we have the amazing lead singer of the band Riot V, who has a new album coming out in February called Mean Streets. And right now they have their new single, High Noon, that's available out now. That's in the link in the description. You can go ahead and click the link. And I'd like to welcome Todd Michael Hall. Todd, how you doing, man?
Hello, guys. Thanks for having me. I meant to ask Brett, what makes you so brutal? I wasn't sure how you got the nickname.
In this case, just being, I'm kind of the hinge to where Nelson is more of the hair metal. I'm more of the black metal, death metal
All
type.
right.
But grew up on a lot of thrash as well and some classic power metals.
All
Why,
right.
Yeah,
why am
mine is
I?
more classic rock
I,
and
I cut in and out for a second. I apologize. I'm not sure
Yeah,
what
I
happened.
see that. So you're like the Cookie Monster vocal guy, and
Oh,
Nelson likes the high screechy vocals like me, maybe. I don't know.
oh yeah, oh yeah, big
yeah.
time, man.
I You know what's funny is like I even bought, I can't remember what the lady's name, but I bought a DVD. It was called, and God, it's been quite a few years. I think back around 2006, and it was called The Zen of Screaming. And it's this lady that puts out this DVD because she can supposedly teach you how to do all that vocal fry, whatever stuff. And because I like literally, I can't touch it. My voice is like hopelessly clean. It's just incredibly clean. And it's to the point of comical. Like I'll record something that I think is raspy and I'll play it for my brother and he'll be like, yeah, it just pretty much sounds the same, Todd, which isn't totally true. I know some of my reverend stuff or whatever, sounds a little more raspy. But yeah, I tried that Zen of Screaming, man. And it just didn't work for me. I remember practicing with I was in a cover tune band with we had Resurrected Harlot at the time, and I was in a cover tune band with my brother, and I remember trying it at like a rehearsal, and I remember just feeling like it was destroying my throat instantly. So I had to kind of throw away that concept. Fortunately, I landed in Riot, the land of, hey, they really like clean, high singers. So, I found my home. So
Speaking of
Very much
clean,
so.
high vocals, how do you keep your voice healthy?
I think really there's probably two, there's this notion that, everybody has their own little pocket, what's natural for them, even, from their range, but also their tone. How some people just have different raspy sounding tones and sound like
Yeah,
they smoke 6 packs of cigarettes or whatever have you. And everybody's got their own thing. And so I definitely have a cleaner voice pretty naturally. As far as that goes, I mean, I think one thing that's helped me is I haven't sang every night. Like I don't sing for a living, so I'm not singing 5-6 nights a week in a bar band and all that kind of jazz. I think that really helps. And then also just the notion of clean living. And I'm a pretty fit guy. My wife is a great cook. I tend to eat healthy and I exercise regularly, so I try to stay fit. I've never been a druggie. I've never been much of a drinker. I mean, I'll have a beer. That's about it. I think that all helps. And then ultimately, too, what people don't realize, too, is when it comes to singing live, it's one thing to sing in a studio. It's another thing to sing live. Like a lot of times in the studio, especially nowadays, like, when I first started recording, back in the 80s, I mean, going to the studio was literally the reels of tape and you sit in the microphone, the guy in the booth and all that. And nowadays, it's just all different than that. I actually can record in my own studio at home and I have my own computer. I can start and stop it when I want. If I'm like, oh, I'm tired, I don't want to do it anymore, I just quit. It doesn't matter. It wasn't like I booked an 8-hour day.
yeah,
But when you record in the studio, you can, sometimes to get more tone, I might push a little harder and stuff and all that. But not necessarily, but live. So I don't want to make it sound like I'm faking it live, but like, let's face it, with Riot, I mean, I've had shows, in Japan and stuff where we've played 27 songs, but typically with Riot, if we're headlining, we'll play at least 20 songs usually. And the Riot material, it's a lot of it's pretty high, and so consequently you have to be able to do it then the next night and the next night. I've had 8 shows in a row before.
yeah.
So you really have to get yourself into this nice zen spot of being able to kind of know physically what you need in order to be able to make the sounds come out without overdoing it. Because if you overdo it, there's two things that are killers: running out of breath and pushing too hard. And they both will really kill you and start to deteriorate your vocals. And once you get down that path, it's really, really tough. So usually at the end of a night with Riot, my routine is I just try to mellow. I try not to talk very much. If I do talk, I'm kind of leaning into someone's ear, so I can be nice and quiet. And I don't stand out in front of in loud music and talk to people. You just can't do it. But usually I feel like maybe a little hoarse, but normally if things are going well for me, then the next day everything's feeling fine. I can kind of go back and do it again. But it really is about maintaining control. It takes incredible discipline to be able to do it night after night and do it well. And what you're trying to do live is, like, for me, I'm kind of a stickler live. I want to try to hit every note. You know what I mean? I don't change melodies, and I don't, so I try to do my best to make it sound as much like the album as I can.
And it sounds amazing.
Thank
you.
you.
You give off that Jeff Tate, my friend Mark Bowles that used to sing for Yngwie. You give off that high vibe that just is amazingly killer.
Thank you. Yeah, I've been, like I said, I've been really fortunate with Riot because I remember when we first started talking. Actually, it was 10 years ago now. It's the anniversary. They announced me in the band in November of 2013, and I actually started working with them late summer. That's when Donnie and I started interacting. I put vocals on a couple songs, and they started shopping them to the record label and that. And but I remember saying to him when he was talking about putting me in the band, I'm like, why don't you send me a set list? And I literally had him send me a set list. I went down in my basement, really, because that's where I was doing some practicing at the time, just to get away from my family, and turned it on and just sang along with the stereo, just to try to get the feel like, can I do this stuff? And I've been very fortunate. It actually mates with my voice quite well. The various singers and the ranges they sing in. I mean, the good luck for me is that, obviously we do a fair amount of Guy Speranza stuff, the first three albums. And then obviously we do tons of Tony Moore era. And those two really, really fit my voice quite well. And it sounds funny, but they're a little different because, like, Guy's sweet spot is definitely different from Tony's. And so, but fortunately, I kind of cover them both. There's, a little bit of stuff that either one do that can, maybe if I do too much of it, might tire me out. But that's the funny part, is every singer's got their own little thing. And so but like I said, I've been blessed to be in Riot just because I feel like the what I'm able to do, that's what people are kind of expecting to hear. And so it's good. It's like I'm a good fit, feels like I'm wearing a glove that fits, so to speak,
Very much so. With that, I was going to ask, are there any songs from the whole spanning discography that you wish that Riot would play or would add to the set list that you feel is in a missed classic, or one that you feel you could really make killer and bring back into, like, the play of it?
I would say we tend to play a lot of the classics. So, I mean, I'd say not so much. There's maybe some, we actually just this year had brought out Overdrive and stuff like that, which was kind of a fun one to sing. I would say for me right now, I think probably for me might be, like, there's a couple songs on Immortal Soul. Like, I thought the Immortal Soul album, which was like, so basically they reunited kind of the Thundersteel lineup and they put out Immortal Soul. And I'm afraid kind of a lot of people maybe didn't hear about it because Mark then passed away shortly thereafter. And then also, Tony, they kind of had to convince Tony to put out another album. And I don't think he was really wanting to tour very much on or anything. So, I don't want to say everything fell apart, but, Riot has its ups and downs. But I thought that was a really interesting album because Tony's voice had kind of matured and he still did some really high stuff, but, like, I don't know, there's just some interesting things he did with melodies and things I thought were really cool. So there's some songs on there like Fall Before Me and Whiskey Man and stuff like that. The funny part is they're probably not live songs, like there's when you, it's tough because when you make an album, a lot of times there's songs that are cool, but live is hard because people want their ass kicked live. You know what I mean? We have a lot of trouble. We have a lot of trouble playing anything that's kind of mid tempo because it starts to feel like it's dragging, So, like even with our last album, Armor of Light, we had that song. I loved it. It was called Caught in the Witch's Eye, and we played it a few times live, and, it went over, but it's tough because, people want to hear Flight of the Warrior. It's like everybody always wants to hear heavy stuff live. It seems, fast, So, but I would say, yeah, to answer your question, I would say there's probably some songs on Immortal Soul that I think would be fun to whip out. I don't know if they're totally appropriate for live, but I think that'd be kind of fun.
Speaking of albums, well, as you mentioned, Armor of Light, I listened to that whole record and I loved it, every single one. Like
Thank
End of the World, that's one of those killer songs, along with the Messiah and Angel's Thunder, Devil's Rain. That was pretty cool. But I want to talk about that new record that you guys coming out, and talk about the writing process and recording about for that record.
It's kind of a funny one because we actually kind of had, I think, most all the songs written for quite a while now, but we ran into that pandemic, and it sounds funny, but it's like we got, I guess, maybe really discouraged by the pandemic. We really didn't want to put out an album during the pandemic because we felt like we couldn't do much with it and couldn't promote it, and then some of us got busy with other things, and so it just got delayed. So yeah, so the writing wise, really, a lot of them, had been written quite a while, really. And then the way that the dynamic works in our band, we really have kind of two music writers, I guess you'd say. Really, the music is generally either written by Donnie or it's written by Mike. And that's the other thing too. I mean, we tend to write separate rather than get in a room and write, which, it makes, it can be hard to just get in a room and write. And then usually the way it works is they will throw stuff at me, and then I sit and listen to it and see if I come up with lyrics and vocal melodies. But a lot of times they have some melody ideas in mind as well. I would say in this one, Mike, Donnie will write some of his own lyrics, the bass player Donnie, but Mike, the guitar player, he doesn't really ever write his own lyrics, even though he might name the song and have a couple ideas in mind maybe, but he generally doesn't like writing lyrics or doesn't feel like that's a strength of his. So Mike and I had to tangle on a few songs. There were a few songs on the album where it was like, I don't know, like, I'm like, Mike, man, give up on this song. Dude, I'm so done with this song, man. I've tried. It's just not good, And there's actually one song where I ended up just throwing it at the rest of the band. I'm like, Frank, please, I'm the drummer. I'm like, please just help me. Like I'm dying here. Mike just keeps beating this song and I can't stand it. We need to do something different. I hate his chorus. He had this song with this really awesome driving riff. And kind of like a hard rockin' driving riff, not like a, heavy metal riff.
Yeah.
And almost like a Rhett Forrester era type of riff or something. And I absolutely love the riff, but like, I just hated his chorus. Like his chorus, I just couldn't. I'm like, Mike, it's just not chorus music. And I beat my head against it for so long and tried 3 different forms of music. And I'm just like, dude, it's just, and finally when I showed it to Frank took it, and even Donnie had the idea. He's like, well, why don't we take that cool intro head riff and make that the chorus, And so Donnie had talked about that. Well, Frank actually took a step further, snipped it together, made it, and then came up with some lyric and melody ideas. And so I had been calling the song one thing, and then Frank ended up calling it another. And then God love Frank. Frank is like, it's so funny. He's such an intelligent guy. And he's just this because he can also be like a discombobulated mess sometimes too. But he's like a perfectionist, and like he will never stop thinking. And so it was funny, like he came up with this good version of the song, but then he's like, okay, well, let's try this and let's try. And like he just kept. I'm like, Frank, just chill, dude. You had a good idea, just leave it alone, But even the real funny thing about it is the song ended up being called "Love Beyond the Grave." And actually, it's like one of my favorite songs on the album. Like seriously, I was like so ready to throw it out, like on so many occasions. But it ended up being, one of my favorite songs. So I thought it was a funny example. So Frank, gets lyric writing credit on it and came up with some great melodies and stuff. And so actually, that'll be one of our lyric videos. I think it's going to come out maybe after the album's out. It'll probably be like a lyric video or something. But it's kind of a different sounding song for us. That's why it wasn't like the lead single, I guess. So, but other than that, yeah, it's generally we kind of work separate and then work. I don't know, man. We actually had a frustrating time recording the album because we recorded drums and we had the album all mixed, and then we ended up deciding we didn't like the sound of the drums.
Mhm.
So then we went back into the studio and re-recorded all the drums, um, and then it ended up with a different producer. It's partly because of timing and stuff. The original person couldn't do it anymore, and
Yeah.
but we ended up with something that was really good. We spent way too much money recording, but oh well, oh well. It's not really meant to be a moneymaker, is it? So, but yeah. So I think we put a lot of time, a lot of effort. I think we specifically, with Armor of Light, I struggled with the drum sound a little bit on that. It had a pretty modern drum sound, and Frank is he's like a machine. This guy is just such an incredible drummer, and then there's double bass, and so there's a lot of double bass. And I don't know, with that album, I was a little bummed because the record label wanted they determined the order of the songs, and to me, they really they're old school Riot guys, and they love the heavy stuff. So they lined up 6 or 7 of the fast songs in a row. So like every song was heavy, double bass. And I know for me, and I'm more of an album listener. Like I want to see the ebbs and flows of an album.
Yeah.
And to me, their song order was horrible. I mean, not to be mean to anybody, but I didn't like the song order. And we proposed a change, and they fought it and didn't do it. And so because of that, so what's weird for me is I think every song on the album is a great song, but when I try to listen to the whole album front to back in the order they ended up deciding, I don't find it as enjoyable. So
You had to
so
skip around.
yeah, so like for me, on this album, I was like, man, Donnie, we've got to pay close attention to the order of songs for me because I'm an album listener and I just want to be able to enjoy it. But then also the drum sound, we wanted to make sure the drums sound, live and like there was really a drummer. It's not a drum machine, but that's the problem is Frank, man, he's just that good. You know what I mean? The guy's feet are so fast. It's insane. And obviously we have some pounders, we call them, on the new album. And so you're probably gonna be like, "Ooh, that sounds like a machine." Nope, that's Frank. That's Frank. He's a machine. The guy's a beast. So
Take it away,
And
Brady.
then speaking of like the idea of album concepts, power metal and the band in general has many very conceptual songs, whether it's talk about battle, the usual power metal type of ideas. I was just wondering what your favorite type of concept or idea within the genre or within your own personal scope is to write about in regards to whether it's more ballads, because you said that you like the more melody and sometimes slower, or even for the hard hitting songs, what are some of the more out there ones that get you really pumped up?
yeah, for sure. I think I think for us, like on this latest album too, we are rooted in what I would call the power metal Riot. We have, with Donnie being a principal songwriter, Donnie was the one that came in and helped transform Riot into what became Thundersteel. When he and Mark partnered up, that's what Mark was wanting to do. Kind of modernize a little bit. At the time, it was modernizing, right? And so that's kind of how they ended up with Thundersteel. And so we're kind of rooted in that Thundersteel power metal era, but at the same time, we give nods to the original, more kind of fast hard rock that Riot originally was.
Yeah.
And so consequently, we want to have some notion of that, in there, but definitely strongly rooted in the power metal. Topically too, obviously Riot has its fair share of sword references and whatnot have you. I'm not, for me, I tend to write like I let a song sing to me, you know what I mean? So I listen to the music and then the song sings to me. And then I think what happens though is a lot of times what pops into my head is, stuff that maybe it's affecting me at that moment or that time. But it also depends because a lot of times Donnie will be like, look, I want to call this song Feel the Fire or whatever. And then I'm like, okay. And I'll just try to run with that,
Yeah.
And Mike will even do that sometimes too. I want to call it this or that, but not always. So it really varies. I think for me, I'm a little, I like the notion of, struggle and overcoming struggle. I'm a little over the incredibly, the Vikings and whatnot have you. I mean, like
Hmm.
it's it's almost like a stereotype that some people just lean so heavy into nowadays that it's like, okay, that's cool for you, but like I can't, do it too much. But
Yeah.
um, so I think for me, I just try. But I more than anything, I just try to vary it up. I think what I specifically try to avoid for me personally, and hopefully we don't see it in Riot either, is the notion of something that sounds negative or. And I know for some people that's their thing. When they think of heavy music, they think of being angry and pissed off and all that. And I get it, but I don't think Riot's really ever been about that. And that's not really my thing either. I'm not going to sit and talk about how much I hate people and what have you or whatever, disemboweling somebody or whatever. I don't know, whatever things you might speak about that. I think there's enough of that. So at this point in my life, I'd rather try to have at least a semi-positive slant on most things. So.
Yeah. Speaking of like touring and being running a family business, how do you do all that without avoiding burnout, like spending time with the family and being on the road and stuff like that? I know you say you guys don't tour that often.
Well, I mean, I think it depends. I think like this year, I mean, the funny thing is this year we didn't really have that many shows. We only had about 15, but I felt like I experienced a little bit of burnout just because of the way the shows were booked. We had 4 trips to Europe. One was for 1 show, one was for 4 shows, one was for 3 shows, and one was for 2 shows. And when you're just flying back and forth to Europe, it's just a lot of time and effort involved to go play a couple shows. And I love it. I love playing the shows, but that can make you feel a little burnout, especially when it's we had like weekends where like we were in Europe and then we had a show here in Bay City, Michigan. Then in the next weekend we were back in Europe, and then 2 weeks later we were back in Europe. And and when you get some of that going, it can be a little much. But the hard part is it can be a little catch can, because you a lot of times there's festivals over in Europe. There's big, there's small. You got festivals where there's only gonna be 500 to 800 people. You got festivals where there's gonna be 1,000 or 2,000. You got all the way up to Wacken with 70,000 people. And a lot of times the festivals kind of they're the tail that wags the dog in a way, because they can pay you enough that you can afford to get there. And then once you're there, you think, well, once we're there, we'll try to book some shows. But it's not always easy to book shows. So a lot of times we'll commit to a festival thinking we can book some shows around it, and then it ends up being harder to book shows around it than we thought. And that's when you end up playing 1 or 2 shows and that sort of thing. And sometimes, I don't do it for money, but sometimes it's frustrating to think that other people are making money off you putting in, sweat and toil and labor.
Yeah.
I won't, there's booking agents and things where you just feel like they don't even have to leave their office and they're getting $1,500 and I go home with $300. What the hell, and I gave up 4 or 5 days, this doesn't make any sense, so, there's some of that. I think that stuff can get you burned out, but I think more than anything, I think it's with life in general. You just have to keep things in perspective, remember why you're doing something, focus on the positives, the things you enjoy. And I have to remind them, as a band, we have to remind, because there's times when we kind of get at each other a little bit. You travel with people and at any point in life, if, the root of all evil is selfish thinking, right? You know what I mean? The minute you start thinking about yourself, your own needs, and that's all you think about, that's where bad things start to, come in.
Yeah.
And so sometimes you just got to remind yourself, you got to be sitting there and, finish up some grueling travel. And then just, when you're sitting there the night before a gig and you've flown into Europe and you're all dog ass tired, but you finish your naps and you wake up and you can't even find a decent restaurant because it seems like the festivals always stick you up in some hotel in the middle of nowhere. And, but you can sit down and get a little bit of food and raise a beer up to each other and say, all right, guys, let's, try to have some fun and get over any whatever, So, it can be hard. But it's enjoyable. I think, this year coming up, we're trying to be we're trying to be smarter about it. So like we had a festival offer in May. So we've got the Hard Rock Festival. It's already been announced, or Rock Hard Festival over in Germany. And so we have I think we're going to be over there for a little over 2 weeks or whatever. And we're going to line up about 10 or 12 shows and have a nice little run over there and just try to make it, meaningful. But, it's hard. Everybody's got things to do. I know Frank's a school teacher and Mike teaches guitar lessons. So does Nick. Donnie has his own kind of business where he preps bars for, he works with different bars and preps them for each evening's activities and stuff. So, we all have stuff to do. And so you just, I don't know. it's definitely a passion project. That's the best way I can describe it. It's not like you're making tons of money. You're doing it, and there's elements of it that are actually kind of pretty miserable. The travel's miserable sometimes and all that. But just getting to be on show and the joy you bring to other people, it really does. I tell people that all the time. You guys make our hearts swell. I don't know how else to describe it. When you're on stage in Cyprus, in a country that doesn't even speak your language, and they're singing back the lyrics to "Take Me Back," that I wrote. It's like, wow, the 13-year-old me would have been like not even believing this was possible.
That's an amazing feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's that you just like said, try to keep things in perspective. Sometimes you got to be kind of, you got to sit down and say, okay, let me put the blessings here and let me put the things here and then realize that there's just so many more blessings and focus on those.
And
Go ahead.
I have a interesting one. Going back to the types of festivals and shows, are there? What do you think of the current state of hard rock and metal in regards to different new types of bands you see on lineups with you, or even fans in general? Is it a? I could only imagine it's a much different atmosphere now, and especially worldwide than what it once was in the 80s and 90s. But I'm just wondering if it's a more unified, if there's more family aspects to it, if it's better.
The funny thing is, obviously, I didn't really have so much exposure to it worldwide. Obviously, when I was quite young, in 88 and, 87, 88, 89, and that when I was doing it, so my exposure to the international side's more doesn't really, when I played my first international show, that was like 2008. I think for me, there's definitely a camaraderie in metal. The funny thing is, like, when you think of metal, you think of, I don't know, especially back in the day, it was almost like you had this reputation that all these people were so scary. And the reality is, generally speaking, I mean, it seems like metal people are pretty family oriented. They're pretty, a lot of times it feels like they're almost like reasonably conservative, not too, even though they might look strange, they're not, they're out there. They're hardworking people. They love, that's what cracks me up with a song like Take Me Back. Take Me Back is like a shuffle beat, not even really heavy song. And they absolutely love that song. And so it's so funny, you'll play a song where they're just like, grr, 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 and they're just like that. And all of a sudden you play Take Me Back, and these big, hairy, sweaty dudes are arm in arm, just bouncing up and down with each other, like, yeah, da, da, da. And so, I think it's interesting. I mean, obviously for me, having been in it for a while, every now and then people say, man, check out this band. And it's funny because there's some element of everything old is new again, especially if younger kids are doing it. And I'll be looking at something like, well, that's, I mean, but see, hearing different albums and seeing and feeling the different influences and all that, it's just kind of interesting. I would say that, it's, in some ways it feels like it's pretty healthy because it does feel like there's young kids coming at it. The US, it's a little tougher in the US. The US, it seems like it's more, yeah, I don't know. The US, it almost seems like the US is into the more gimmickly latest thing. Like sometimes I'll see something and I'll be like, really? Like, and it'll have so many views and I'll just be like, what is that? And the people are full on leaning into it. They got like fur and swords and helmets and all this crazy stuff going on. And like, they got hundreds of thousands or millions of views. You're just like, what? Like, and I'm not trying to slam anybody. Just sometimes it just, there was one a little while back and I had to do with dwarves or something like that. I can't remember the name of the band. And it was just funny. Pardon me?
I'll have to look that up later.
Yeah, it was like, I think the whole band is based around dwarf motif or something. And I remember that it was a couple years ago. They came out and like, man, this video had like 2 million views and people were going nuts for it. I was just like, okay, So it almost seems like with this TikTok generation. I mean, I have a 20-year-old, a 19-year-old, and a 13-year-old, right? And it's like everybody's TikTok, so it almost seems like things get viral, and so sometimes it almost feels like, you got to walk around with your dick hanging out or something in order to be able to catch on. It's like, and obviously I'm not going to do that. So, and I don't necessarily mean to slam anyone else, but like I said, it just feels to me like sometimes the gimmicky things are what become popular. So that's a little bit odd for me, but I'm just like, the social media, all this stuff, I'm not good at all that. I just, so what do I do? I'm an old guy. What do you want?
Speaking of which, what do you notice about the differences between European audiences and American audiences when you guys play festivals and shows?
I think that in terms of the audience, I mean, I would say the first thing it seems to me is the audience in Europe are just generally bigger. All
Oh,
right,
yeah,
so that'd be the
I've
first
seen
thing.
it.
But in terms of the people, I think that the US audiences in some ways, I think they're the same and trying to be the same. It's just that when you have a little bit bigger crowd or even if or a more packed crowd, you know what I mean? Like, because
Yeah.
sometimes so the right, you're talking about the energy level in the room. And the energy level in the room, it seems like you have to have a crowd that fits that, like what I would call the socially comfortable level. I mean, well, obviously you need to have at least some and be able to make it socially comfortable. If not, people think, oh, it's empty, and then the packed feeling and all that. And so I think it's easier to get to that level maybe in Europe. So I'd say that'd be the only difference. And I think once you get to that level, that's when the energy level starts to rise a little bit. But it's. I mean, like I said, I mean we've played quite a few shows in the US this time, and what's interesting to me is, how when you go see a band and like, the people don't always go up to the stage for the opener bands, but then when the headliner band,
Oh yeah,
they kind of crowd the stage.
Mhm.
And generally
guilty.
speaking, we get that kind of treatment.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying because we're huge, because obviously we're not that huge, but generally speaking, we get that treatment. And so what's interesting is even if there's only 50 people and they come cram the stage and their fists are in the air, it's fun and you're having a good time. So, but I think, energy wise, I mean, I don't feel like there's a real big difference. I mean, we've even played in Japan. We've played in South America. We've played in Japan like 6 times. I mean,
Oh,
I think Japanese people are maybe a little more reserved, whereas your Greeks are a little more not reserved. They're like not like they're crazy nuts, but like they're loud singers, amazingly loud. It's fun, and they like to get on stage and jump off and stage dive, even the ladies. I remember the first time we played in Athens, like this dude with like a skullet jumps up on stage, and I was like, I thought for sure he was coming to jump on me, and he just like that, and he just jumped off the stage. I was like, all right, okay. But yeah, I think there's a similarity. I remember when we played in South America, we were in Colombia, and
uh-huh.
we played a bar, and then like the next night they put us in this little town, and I'm forgetting the name of it. And we played in this bar that was like you had to like duck to get in
Yeah.
through the door, and it was this old like salt storage warehouse. It was near a salt mine, and it was like a salt storage warehouse. So like it
Oh,
was like a concrete building that was like an arch, and it wasn't very tall at the top of the arch, 8 feet maybe,
yeah.
10 feet at the most. Um, and it was a cool looking place. So, I mean, it just had this neat little bar and stone doorway and all this kind of stuff. It was really neat. But the funny part is we go into play and they had like a stage that was about, a foot tall and the drummer could be on it. And I was just on the floor in front of it. And it was a small room. I don't know. It might have only been 30 people, but I mean, it was somewhere between 30 and 40 people. And by the end of the night, we're doing Swords and Tequila, and I just got my microphone. And I'm just jumping up and down, surrounded by people. Some chicks pinching my butt, whatever. I'm like, hey, I think the thing is, it can be fun no matter what. Sometimes those are actually more memorable than the big ones. Because like sometimes when you play the big ones, the people get so far away, you don't
Yeah.
feel like. I like to feel like I like to like step out onto the wall and feel like I'm kind of in the people a little bit. It just feels
Yeah.
more fun to me. And sometimes, like in Japan, when we played like the Saitama Super Arena, there was like 10 or 15,000 people, but they had that track in the front that the camera goes up and down.
Oh yeah.
And so in order to have that, I mean, the wall was like 15 feet or more away from the stage. And so it's like it feels a little weird, to be that far away from people.
There's no
Um,
catwalk that goes out to the crowd.
yeah, that makes it more. Yeah, the Keep It True festival, they used to do that. They would have like a catwalk that would go around, and you'd be surrounded. You could get more. Actually, that reminds me, the one show we played in Colombia, they had the stage was about 2 feet tall,
Uh-huh.
but it was made of these squares that were like a meter square. So And it was so funny because they set them up, and so we got three people up front. So they had the drummer in the back, and then they had a square for Mike, a square for Donnie, and a square for Nick, and then they put a square in front that was for me. And
Yeah.
it was the strangest show because like the people, they had a little wall set up so the people were about a foot or so away from you, right? But
Yeah.
my square was like out in front of everyone else, and there was no place else to go. So for the whole set, I'm like standing out in front of everyone else on
Oh,
this
wow.
1 meter square. That's where I had to just rock out. Like I didn't get to go really anywhere else. And the interesting thing is above me, it was like a balcony, like three-sided, I think. Like people could be all around me. And
Uh-huh.
as well as they were in front of me and wrapped around me. And so while I'm performing during some of the songs, you could turn around, there were people up above, fists in the air. And so I mean, sometimes it's just crazy. I don't know. There's just so many different memories. And so, like I said, some of the weird ones like that just really stick out to you. And that those amaze me. When you go to another country and the people are singing along to your songs in English,
Yeah.
I'm pretty American centric. I took Spanish when I was in high school for a year, and like obviously I don't speak Spanish, but a couple words, and
Yeah.
so the fact that these people can speak it, a lot of times they're like, "Oh, I'm sorry, my English bad." I'm like, "Dude, your English is way better than my German or my Spanish or my French or whatever." So
Yeah, I hear you. Go ahead, Bert.
All right.
it's
And
amazing.
oh,
Yeah, I was gonna say, it's amazing how we've kind of exported this music around the country and around the world, and then so many other people kind of join in on it and stuff. It's unfortunately for us, English tends to be the language people use. So.
Absolutely.
well, I would say that music is the language people use, and you brought metal kind of to television with your stint on The Voice. Care to tell us a little bit more about how that experience went? And I'm sure it was incredibly interesting as well.
Yeah, it was. I just, I was just sitting there when my sister had mentioned it when, you should do this, you should do that. And I don't know, somehow an email came through and it said, oh, they're having auditions in Chicago. And I was just like, I looked, and I think my daughters had, soccer tryouts the weekend before, and the weekend after we were leaving to go see my wife's family in India. But that weekend I was free, and I was like, I wonder if I should drive to Chicago. And I don't know what the heck. And then I asked my mom, and my mom's like, well, do you think you'd have fun? And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, well, then go. And so, so I just drove to Chicago and did this open cat call thing, and it was an interesting experience. I didn't really know what to expect, and yeah, that day. You just went in, and they pulled you in groups of 10 into like a little room, and there was someone that would listen to you in a cappella. They would get everybody pumped up, and then one by one, each of you 10 people would go, and after you got done singing, everybody, oh, good job, and then at the end, after the 10th person was done, the person in front, who was the casting agent, I guess you'd say, if she read your name, you were supposed to stay back, and otherwise it was like, see you later. So I got that, and then just kind of kept going. And after that, I had to come back to a studio and film so the producers could see me. And then after that was an executive callback, and then after that, it was actually the blind audition. So it was, I would say, for me, obviously, you kind of have these little fantasies in your head, like, oh, maybe I'll really catch on, but I think more than anything for me, it was just like, it was kind of like, catch a wave and ride it, or
Yeah.
whatever, see what it's like, the experience, for me, I was old, like there were people on the show, because you have to give up a fairly decent amount of time, especially, the blind audition process, that was about a 3-week process. And then when I went back for the knockout, for the battle round, the knockout round, that was like another 3-week process. And so, most people can't get that much time off work, so we had people on the show that quit their jobs just so that they could go,
Wow.
kind of pursue their dream and try to do this. I think fortunately I didn't have to quit my job, and I was also 50 when I was on the show, so my career is pretty established. I'd been working in my family business almost 30 years at that point, full time. And so for me, it was kind of like, I'm just going to go have fun, see what happens. And I did have some people, why would you do that? Well, why wouldn't, I'm a performer. I love to sing,
Yeah.
and why wouldn't you want to perform on national TV? I mean, I guess there's that risk that maybe nobody's chair would have turned, or I would have screwed up or something. But fortunately, that didn't happen to me. So, and then let's face it. I mean, to me, Lou Gramm is such an incredible singer. I don't have his rasp, but Jukebox Hero is such an awesome song, and I've known it since I was 11 years old. I've always loved it, and it's got that ability to go up and do some nice head voice notes at the end. So I was like, man. So that was kind of my song. I did that a cappella for, the original thing, and then I kept doing it. I did other ones. I did "Wanted Dead or Alive" for the producers, and different. I did other songs for the producers.
Yeah.
I did Judas Priest, "Another Thing Coming." I did Bryan Adams. I did a Journey song. I did different songs, but when it came time for the blind audition, I think they, the funny thing is like, at the end, I'm like, "Jukebox hero, like, and the funny thing is, like, when I was trying at the executive callbacks, when I was doing the song, the main casting lady, and then there's, a bunch, they kind of made it like you were in a little lounge, had some couches and stuff set up for the producers, and just try to make a relaxing atmosphere, have some candles lit, and the casting agent lady was in back, and she's running the song, and so we get to the end of the song, and like I'm just to the point where I'm going to get to belt out those notes, and all of a sudden she takes the fader knob and just break down the music, and I'm like, "Oh, you didn't even let me get to hit my big notes," But apparently they'd seen enough, it was good for them, I guess. So
yeah, that was amazing. I remember seeing that. I'm like, oh, it's Todd from Riot V. And then I watched when you guys did the Tina Turner song.
Yep.
That was amazing.
Yeah, I thought that one turned out really great. I mean, because at first I was like, "What, Tina Turner?" But then I realized, oh wow, this fits my range quite well, and I thought we did a great. And I'd love to repost it too. Like the blind audition, I was able to repost on my, because at the 2-year mark they take them down. I think it has to do with sync licensing and stuff. And so I was able to repost my blind audition, but they only allow you to get so much before they'll consider it copyright infringement,
Yeah.
And so the battle round with Joey and I, that the Tina Turner song, that's more like 2.5 minutes, and so that's beyond. So every time if you try to load it to YouTube, it tells you, hey, well, you're in violation, like you're not in trouble, but people in America won't be able to see it. I'm like, well, what's the point? Why would I do it? So I'd love to be able to post that one. I would say that would be my, I don't know if I would say regret, but I mean, if I have a regret from it, would be the song selection process. It's a little tricky. Let's just say you can't do whatever you want. You know what I mean? You kind of get a little hemmed in, and I didn't really like the third song that much. I didn't think I did that great of a job on it too, and I didn't like it. So there's a part of me that wishes I could have done a different song. But that being said, I really don't think the circumstances would have changed much for me. There was 2 really strong people on my team. They ended up number 1 and number 2 at the end of the show. I don't think I would have got much further anyway. But maybe with some better songs, I don't know. Like since then, I've seen. Now I don't watch the show that religiously, but a little bit. I will see stuff on YouTube and that. And since then, I've seen a couple people that are a little more rock oriented kind of get further in the process. But even in the end, when you win, like. Name somebody from The Voice that's huge. It's not like, you got Carrie Underwood, but she was American Idol, and you got Kelly Clarkson, they were American Idol, So there's nobody really. So I think for me, it was fun, and I thought it'd be interesting, and it really was. I mean, to experience the behind the scenes stuff, to be in the makeup room and in the wardrobe room, and have Ted Danza walk down the hall. Is it Ted Danson? Yeah, the guy was on Cheers or whatever. And he was walking down the hall. I was walking across the hall, like from one room to the next, and he was walking that way, and I almost ran into him. I'm like, "Oh, hey, Ted," just stuff like that. Being on the back lot and just being able to say you experienced all that was pretty interesting. It's kind of like a little rock and roll fantasy camp or whatever you want to call it.
Oh yeah, that's fun. Go ahead, Brett.
Let's see. Speaking of that, are there any songs? I know that you cover songs as well. Are there any ones that you wish that you can upload that either you and just different types of genres in general that you think that you would have a cool way or a cool rendition of doing? Whether your own style, making it anything like that.
That's. I think one of the weird things for me is I'm not, when it comes to cover tunes, I get the original in my head, and that, especially if it's a song I love, and that's the one I love. So to me, when I go to do a cover tune, for my personality, and I'm not saying I'm right, other people are wrong or anything like that. I'm probably wrong, but for my personality, I love the original one so much that I'm a little more trying to pay homage to it. I'm trying to do it exactly like they did. And whereas what's really interesting is when people can come along, and some of the cats on The Voice were like that, where they could they could just totally reinterpret the song, and that's not really my forte for sure. I remember there was this guy, I'm pretty sure his name was Jacob, and he and I talked a few times on the show, and he had reinterpreted like a Post Malone song or something, and it was just him on an acoustic guitar doing this song, and I was just like, wow, that's so cool, like so yeah, so that's not really my thing. And then it's tough because there's some people where I don't know, I just there's some people that I just think are so I don't know how to describe it. They're so iconic that I don't know that I even wanna try like Journey. Like, to me, Steve Perry, it's like, don't even bother. I mean, to me, it's not like I it's not like I don't think he's the best singer in the world, but I think on his songs and back in the day, it was just so good that, like, I don't really wanna be compared to that. I just don't know that I'm not gonna improve upon it, that's for sure, you know what I mean? So which I don't know, I guess I almost feel the same way about Jukebox Hero, but whatever, I did that one. I don't know, yeah, I don't know what it is, for me. So I've kind of a little bit of a although recently, like, I went to Mike and Riot and that End of the World song you mentioned. I'm like, Mike, man, why don't we do? Because actually I saw a YouTube video where some guy took I think it was Somewhere in Time by Iron Maiden, and he just did this kind of slowed down acoustic thing, and it let you see how beautiful the melodies and stuff were. And I told him, I'm like, Mike, man, why don't we do that with End of the World, And and I mean, you could film you on guitar and me singing, and we'll just mash it together, make a little social media post out of it. And he's so busy. I mean, he hasn't gotten around to it. I told him, he's like, well, I'm so held up on the solo section. There's good. I'm like, Mike, I didn't even want a guitar solo. I'm like, just do like verse, chorus, first chorus, and we'll get out. I mean, I just wanted to have a little bit of flavor. I'm like, this is just a social media post, dude. Don't put so much into it. I would like to do that. I would say that the problem that I have, if I were a better guitar player, I'd probably do more than that. But the problem I have is like I'm a strummer. And so like I just sound like that dude going strum, strum, strum while he's playing. And to me, that's like your campfire guy. And like I pretty much just want to pick up the guitar and beat it. I'm not one of those do pick it and make a really beautiful sounding thing, and not that it has to be picking, it can be strumming, but you know what I mean? Like you can tell the difference between somebody who really plays guitar well and someone like me who's more of like I play guitar well enough to write songs and and that sort of thing, but I'm not a partly because I just don't put the time into it, and partly because I don't think I have the natural proclivity for it, especially with rock guitar and putting all the little nuances and stuff. So I think if I were really good at that, then I probably would post a lot more cover tunes, but yeah, so there you go.
I want to talk about your influences. Who were your biggest influences? And if you had to pick top 5 favorite albums, go album wise, what would they be? No particular order.
Yeah. Well, I mean, influences wise, I mean, they kind of started really quite early. I mean, it'll sound stupid, but like when I was young, I thought like Lionel Richie was badass, because I was taking piano lessons when I was 9, 10 years old, and he was hip and he was a piano player. And so he kind of made piano playing cool. And I thought he was, sail on down the line, all this stuff. I remember learning how to play Endless Love on the piano, him and Diana Ross. I mean, I was 10, and then Barry Manilow and stuff. My brother started getting into hard rock stuff. The first stuff was like Styx, REO Speedwagon, stuff like that. So somebody like Tommy Shaw, to see him out there now, still sounding badass and still, singing so wonderful. I think without a doubt, somebody that was a huge influence on me was Jeff Tate. I went to see Queensryche open up for Kiss on the Animalize tour. My brother Rick had already exposed me to him. He played the EP for me and it's like, dude, this guy can sing, but I didn't really have the EP. I wasn't, I think my brother had it, so I'd heard it, whatever. But I went to see them on so maybe I'd bought the Warning or whatever. I think I had. And so when I went to see them, that was the Warning tour, and they opened up for Kiss, and I was down close, and just the sight of him hitting those notes, like, so just so you know, it also has to do with the timing of my development. So like I had quite a high voice when I was a little boy. But I went through puberty really late. Like I went through puberty when I was 15, right? And so when I was in 7th grade academic track, I sang Tomorrow, the Annie theme song, tomorrow,
Oh yeah,
tomorrow. That I
absolutely.
sang that, just cold up, just sang it, same key and everything as a little boy. Um, and I think the next year I sang a Journey song, academic track, Open Arms. And, so what happened is I got in the band with my brother John when I was 15. And I was, I'm somewhat of a tenory voice, I guess you would argue. So, I mean, I could sing a little higher, but I couldn't do the real high stuff. So it was at that phase that I went and watched Jeff Tate just and hit all these notes live, and it just I was blown away. I was like a Jeff Tate disciple for quite a few years, because I remember it was that, and then Rage for Order and Operation Mindcrime, and I even loved Empire. By the time Empire was around, I was in college, but I remember those other ones. That was back when you'd have the. I remember going on vacation with my family and having my little Walkman and my headphones and just sitting and just listening to like those albums with Jeff Tate. Like I feel like I know every little nuance of his vocal expression. And so yeah, he was a huge influence on me. But another guy who was pretty similar for me was Eric Adams from Manowar. He had a really huge influence on me. And I think the thing is, this will sound stupid, but because I have a clean voice, I tended to gravitate toward the singers that had clean voices. So that's the one thing that bums me out about Eric Adams. He's so badass because he can sound like an animal, or he can get that thing, but then he can sound so beautiful and clean like an opera singer. So I'm definitely a bit envious or whatever of that ability of his. So I would say I'd put him in there. I think Ronnie James Dio to me feels like he's a really big influence, but the funny thing is I didn't realize it back then like I realize it now. Like I went to see him live a couple times. This is going to sound funny. The first time I went to see him live at the Saginaw Civic Center here in Saginaw, I went just because, back then tickets were $15. I had my paper out or whatever I could afford it. I was working in the family business by then. And so I went, and I remember being like, who the hell is this Dio guy? Like, how come he can just come out and have albums in his name and be playing these? And once again, I hadn't listened to Black Sabbath. I didn't know, people are everybody's laughing at me now. Oh, what an idiot, I didn't know. I was 15, whatever. And, but I remember being pretty blown away by him live. And I saw two of his albums. It was, not Holy Diver, but the one after that, the Last in Line, and then the one after that, Sacred Heart. Those are the ones I saw. And the funny part is, though, is I didn't really realize how much I really loved them until later. Later as an older adult and stuff, and almost beyond all of that stuff, coming back to him, be like, my God, this guy's incredible. So I consider him probably a pretty big influence. Tony Harnell from TNT. I remember just really like that Knights of the New Thunder and Tell No Tales. I mean, sing along with that. Tell No Tales. It's like, oh my God, how high can you sing? And it sounds like Helium. I remember that one. There was a band called Shy, although when they came over here, they kind of had to change their name to Shy England. The guys, that guy, Tony Mills, he ended up getting in TNT for a while. Sadly, he passed away. He had cancer, I believe. And but not that I followed everything of his career, but they had an album called Excess All Areas. I just absolutely love that album to the day. Got a little more keyboard than I usually like in my hard rock and my metal, but absolutely his voice on that stuff is beyond. If you've never heard it, if you've never listened to Excess All Areas, I mean, be prepared for it's not pounding metal, but my God, the vocal performances on that are just stupidly good. Obviously Michael Sweet from Stryper. I used to love his stuff. I mean, there was even bands like Heavy Pettin' back in the day. They had a cool album. Warrior. The guy's name was oh my God, I'm totally forgetting his name. Perry McCartney or something like that. Paramore is his name. I don't know if you ever heard Warrior, Fighting for the Earth, that album. If you have not, please go find it. It's it's absolutely incredible. Also Q5, Steal the Light. I mean, it was an incredible album. So actually, I mean, just so many really good singers. There was another band called Surgeon, Surgin, with like an apostrophe, like you're surging, but they got rid of the G. And then they kind of broke apart and then released another album under a band named Prophet. And I think the guy's name was Russell Akera. I thought he had a really cool voice. I listened to they somehow had some weird connections to John Bon Jovi because they were probably from Jersey. So I mean, yeah, there's just so many great singers. Oh, you wanted some top albums? Oh God, I don't know. It sounds stupid, but that raid the Warning from Queensryche, even though I know it's got a lot of moody, weird shit on it, but for whatever reason, it just made such a huge impression on me that's a really big album for me. Um, Manowar, it's tough to even pick because I really love a lot of their first albums. Battle Hymns is incredible, but so is Kings of Metal and Fighting the World, Hail to England. I mean, I love all those albums. And obviously Holy Diver by Dio is pretty damn up there. And I haven't really mentioned Iron Maiden, but I have incredible respect for for Bruce Dickinson. He was always my brother Rick's favorite, and Queensryche was my favorite. So it was almost like one's a New York Jets fan and one's the New York Giants or whatever. But yeah, I mean, obviously Bruce is an incredible singer. I've heard his stuff a ton. So a lot of great singers. Actually, one singer that I probably now wish I would have listened to, but I didn't back in the day was Michael. Is it Kiske? Do you pronounce it? I don't know if you pronounce the E on the end. Kiske, whatever, the guy from Halloween. And the funny part is, when I fell in love with them, like I bought a Unisonic album. We played with them on the Keep It True festival in Germany, and he and the guitar player guy, whose name I'm totally forgetting, they're both now back in Halloween. But they had a Unisonic album. It has like a little spaceship on it or something.
Yeah.
And I listened and I'm like, oh my God, this guy's voice is just phenomenal. His vibrato and his ability to hold notes and his tone is incredible. So yeah, but I don't know why how sometimes when you're a young kid, you don't realize how dumb you are when you make some of your decisions. Like, I don't really like the way that guy looks, so I'm not going to listen to his album. Well, that, or whatever, what I mean? There's just something where you're like, I don't like that or whatever, I Want Out. I didn't really like the song I Want Out. So I guess maybe I just didn't. Not that it's a sucky song, but I just didn't care for it, so I didn't bother listening. Or maybe I didn't. I don't know. Don't ask me. But kid, when you're young, you make stupid decisions. So, but yeah, there's so many awesome singers, dude. I feel like awesome singers are almost a dime a dozen. You know what I mean? That's why I think it all comes down to songs and melodies and having. You got to have a great song. Like I got over that trying to hit the highest note thing like a long time ago. I did that on my first Harlot album and now it's like, okay. I mean, not that I won't hit a high note here and there, but I recorded a song for somebody a little while back, and they were like, all right, on this part of the beginning, we want to scream. And I was like, it doesn't really feel to me like it needs a scream right there. So I didn't put one in there. All like, oh man. So they had somebody else put one on or something like that, I don't want something too forced, so, but I just, that's what I want. I think more than anything is write songs that, to me, I've spent a fairly decent amount of time traveling. And when I was I remember I've gone to Kathmandu, Nepal quite a few times because my wife's family lived there for a few years. And I remember walking around Kathmandu, Nepal, and they have this area called Tamil, which is just like a labyrinth of streets and shops and all these things. And there'll be these kind of record stores, if you will, where they sell cassettes. It's all bootleg, everything. But you'll hear the music playing. And I remember walking down the street and you'd hear Dust in the Wind playing by Kansas, or you'd hear different rock songs playing. And to me, that's what I would want. I want to write a song that friggin' 20, 30 years later, they're still playing it, even in friggin' Kathmandu, because it's such a big, huge song, Think about being the author of Stairway to Heaven, or something like that. That to me is what, I hitting the highest note. Yeah, that's cool. But there's always going to be a higher singer probably, I want to write a great melody, so that's the spot I'm at. I want to write something that's memorable and touches people and reaches people.
Absolutely. All right, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. Anything else you'd like to add, Brutal Brett, before we close this out?
I'm going to listen to some of these bands. I'm going to look up that Surgeon album. That looks really cool. And Prophet as well. I'd like to thank you as well.
Yeah, you're very welcome. And thank you guys for having me. I'm sorry I talked for so long. You only got to ask 2 questions and a whole hour goes by, So.
Todd, I want to thank you for your time, and it's a pleasure to have you on here. Where can everybody go and find you?
Well, obviously I'm on social media under Todd Michael Hall. Everybody can find that. We have the Riot webpage, Are You Ready to Riot? But probably it's just as easy to look look us up on Facebook and Instagram, and that's where you get latest updates. It seems like that's the easier place to update nowadays. But our new album, Mean Streets, comes out on Atomic Fire, and it comes out on February 16th. We actually have a video coming out. We have another video that'll come out, I think, around the first week of January, and that'll be a performance video. And then we have another video that'll come out the day it's released. And then I think there'll be another lyric video after that. So we'll have some more stuff coming out. And I think it's a great album, good, diverse album. I think people are going to really like it. It's very, it's definitely heavy. But it's got some great, that's one thing I love about Riot. Even when they're really heavy, there's still tons of melody. And so that's why part of the reason I love the band so much. So yeah, I look forward to that. We're trying to book some more shows, even here in the US. So hopefully we can get out on the road and see some people in person here.
Would be great to see you out this way. I know you guys were out this way and we couldn't catch you, but hopefully next time around we'll definitely be at the show.
All right. Well, thank you. Appreciate you chasing me down. I appreciate you being patient and waiting until I felt like the time was right for the interview. So
absolutely. Wanted to make sure everything was good and ready to go. So
yeah, well, we definitely got to have something to talk about. It can't make it just about me. That's for sure. I got to have a Riot album to talk about or something.
Sounds good. All right. I want to thank Todd Michael Hall again for his time. It was an absolute pleasure having him on here, and the lyric video and all the links to Todd and Riot V will be in the link in the description. Check out the new album, buy it. Check out the new song on YouTube called High Noon by Riot V. And go to Fun Never Ends Podcast. Whenever this podcast is available everywhere. And for myself, Todd, and Brutal Brett, this has been an episode of Fun Never Ends Podcast. Thank you. Bye.